there are so many tools, so many technologies, so many connections, and then the data gets, like, there are various data sources. It's coming into your data lake, then it's raw data, then you process the data. Okay, you have data catalog, you have data discovery approach, you have data lineage, and then you get a trusted data which goes to the visualization, which then you can share the data. Then that data can go to your AI models, and then there will be insights generated out of it. So this is required for strategic and operational decision. These are automatic decisions, like AI is for automatic decisions, or giving something which is not easily seen. And this is how the data movement is happening. And anywhere there could be an error, and a small error can have a very big impact, because you are looking at a big data. So your data size is huge. It is this. So therefore it would go more on the your trust is more important. And how do you build that trust? Because there will be a huge team working on it. It's not practical for one person to handle everything in a big data science project. So there will be tools, there will be technologies, there will be people. So all those things would contribute to the data governance, which will give you your decisions or your automatic decision. So you might have learned a lot about how do you make a regression model, and how do you make a classification model, and um, clustering and various things of AIs. But if the data is not correct, nothing of that thing would be working. So this is a primary responsibility of a data engineer or everybody in the data science team, that the data, it's whatever data coming in our data lake, which is used for various decision, is kind of governed properly. We have a team who is kind of looking after the data, governing the data, so that the data can be shared, data can be visualized for different decisions, and obviously it can go for development and moving to machine learning model. So obviously we're talking about data. So we all know that data is as important as roti kapda makan. We cannot live without the data. If Wi-Fi is down, we cannot. It's kind of very difficult to live without Wi-Fi nowadays. It's a new oil, so everything data is important. And but only data doesn't make sense. If the data is governed better, it is more important. So data governance is uh, quite important, because you can say that 30% of the time is wasted due to data that is badly governed. So it's a huge amount of time that will get wasted if the data is badly governed. And obviously your brand value would decrease. uh, you will not Your results will fail, everything will fail if the data is not governed properly. So data governance is one of the top three differences between the firms that capture this value and firms that don't. So it's one of the primary differentiators between the organizations. So it's a primary differentiator between the countries, like as we have seen that what in our example. So it's a primary differentiator. So it's if it is there, many people would get attracted towards your project, and if it is not there, it will not work. Even in the pandemic, we understood actually the governance, the role of government, like how they are doing it. And we all the time talk about bad governance, but it's not that easy to govern things. But data but if you have good governance, things would get streamlined quite properly. Maybe we have done some good policies and governed them better, therefore the pandemic is in control now. So all those policies, everything, whatever, although we kind of blame somebody all the time, it's not working. But without the governance, things will not move at all. So it's huge amount of time will get wasted, and the data will not achieve the speed, trust, or the compliance that are required. so that the data would have of limited value if you are not governing the data properly. So if you are a data engineer, like say, let me see, because this is primarily a data engineer's responsibility. So data scientist would build model and based on the data that you are giving. So it's a responsibility of data engineer that typically in the organization role. It's a responsibility of everybody actually. But data engineer is supposed to be gathering the data, cleaning the data, processing the data, preparing the data, we are optimizing the data, managing the data, governing the data, and we have to ensure that the right quality data is available to the right time to the right people, and manage overall we have to manage the complete data science project, which is obviously constitute of people, processes, and technologies. So here, when you are actually doing a project, when you are working on a live project, you are it's a different feeling. Like it's like a medical student. You are when you are learning, maybe you are operating on animals or some dead animals kind of stuff, and when you are actually in the hospital, you are operating the real human being. So it's that difference when you are working on a sample data and when you are working on live data. So data engineering is the practice of designing, building systems, and collecting, storing, and analyzing data at scale. Because data, that way we are been using data from our college first day, like input, output, input, process, output, and maybe some database and something in SQL, something in Oracle, whatever. We will have done project. All of you have done the project. Right now, also you are doing some project with whatever the data that we have. But when the data turns the live data, and when it becomes data at scale, then the complete scenario things changes. So let me tell you like how means here what I've told you is data at scale is important. So let me give an example like how the data at scale how is important. Uh, so I'm giving an activity like you write number 75. Okay, how much time it took for you?
Maybe 1 second.
Okay, and how much effort it took?
0.
Zero. Okay, now I want you to write this 75. Now Navratris is going on, so all flowers are there. Okay, so how much time it will take?
I have to first count how many dots are there and
Yeah, you have to first find the flowers, you have to get them, and then you have to put it. So maybe couple of hours. Okay. So here, see the activity is same. The first activity take maybe a second, and now it has become couple of hours. Now, how does this sound?
I need to find a baker then.
Yeah. So maybe a day or two elapsed time. You have to find a baker and you have to get it at home. So you are writing 75, but now the time has gone to maybe 2 days, like planning and getting it. What about this?
It takes
No.
75 years to build a
Yeah.
country.
So now look at here. Here the cost has drastically increased. Now look at cost also. Every time, okay, the like flowers maybe few hundreds, cake maybe few thousands. Now it becomes maybe few lakhs if I'm making it in gold and whatever it is. So your activity is same, time required for the activity and the cost required for the activity is changing. Okay. And now what about this? what I'm saying is, when your data is changing and data is scaling up, the cost required, the time required, the resources required, the efforts required are drastically different. Uh, so that's what the scale is now. Here, your use case is the same, writing number 75. Your use case would be customer segmentation. Your use case could be anything that you're doing in classification case. Whatever your use case it is, the the environment and the data that you are going to use, that's changing, completely changing the scenario, completely changing the impact, completely changing the time required to do it, the resources required to do it, the planning required to do it. So writing 75 in the sky, just see the amount of planning that would be required and the amount of resources that is required. So when you are doing data science project at scale, you are somewhere here, okay? It's like a lot of work, maybe small projects, and this is the huge project that you are doing. And it's kind of life, like if something goes wrong here, it's a life and death situation kind of stuff. So that's what is the difference. Your use case remains the same. Your use case could be just a customer segmentation, your use case could be just a classification model, your use case could be just time series sales forecasting model. So all those things, but here, depending on the scenario, on depending on the data that we have, things change drastically. So that's the need of an hour, that you have to have proper data governance. Otherwise, you won't be able to scale it up, you won't be able to deliver. Okay, so that's what I mean by at scale. So the use case remains the same, your data is creating the values, and therefore the data needs to be governed better, so that whatever use case, you will be able to deliver the value that is required. So if I talk about data management framework, obviously there are anything will need people, processes, and technologies. So these are mostly the components of data governance. Like you have data governance, your data quality, metadata management, data integration, data architecture, data privacy, security, master data management, and obviously analytics and ML AI. So this becomes a small component when you talk about data governance, and when you talk about the real data of the customer. So let's talk about data management. So first of all, data management is design and development and execution of, like, what is the architecture. So maybe architecture is already decided for your project. So whether you are going Azure way, you are going GCP way, AWS, or whatever your in premises architecture that you have. Policies, some of the policies are already there, some of the policies are country specific, some of the policies are legal policies, some of your organization policies, and then some of your project policies. So various practices, how you are going to manage. So all project management practices also gets applied here. The kind of procedures that they are going to do, and so how you are going to manage the complete life cycle in an enterprise way. It's a tricky issue for all organization of all sizes, because sometimes data is valuable, sometimes the data is garbage. So it's a very thin line between the data that is valuable and the data was valuable a lot here, and then suddenly it becomes a garbage. So that's the data life cycle. So it's a very tricky issue. So data comes in various all sizes and across all industries. It is really challenging to maintain accurate and consistent data across wide variety of business functions, and thus use data effectively to achieve business value. Ultimately, we have to deliver some business value, whatever your project may be. If it is not derived, if it's not delivering the business value, it's of no use. And without data governance, you cannot deliver business values. There has to be a good management practices, good governance policies, ensuring that data is going inside correctly, and then only it will deliver the values. So obviously, we talked about governance. We know, like, we blame government most of the time, and what does the government is doing? Like, they are, what exactly the government is doing? Because we just typically on the other side of the fence when we are talking about our government, and we typically blame them. But what are they actually doing? Is they are preparing policies, they are preparing actions, they are preparing laws, which everybody has to follow. So there are conduct policies, actions. So you as a data engineer, or you, if you're working in a data science project, you are kind of at the role of that government. So because you are the owner of the complete data that is coming into your system, so you are the owner, you are accountable for it, you are responsible for it. Therefore you have to follow the policies and actions, and uh, you have to define the policies for your project. You have to define the policy and implement those policies for your project, so that your data is governed better, and you have a complete good ecosystem, so that your project is looked as a good project and it is delivering the value. So if you have, like, obviously everything would need people, processes, and technologies, but here in the data governance you have to take the ownership of the data. Okay, you have to take ownership of the data. It's a very big word, because here, like, just imagine a bank, and if I'm a data engineer for the bank, I'm taking ownership of everybody's data. Okay, so that's a big ownership, and I'm so just imagine, like, I'm taking responsibility of all the data that you have in for yourself in bank, so that I know all the things that you have, and I have to ensure that everything is correct there. Okay, accessibility, like, just let me take an example of bank only. Like, I should be, only me should be accessing my own account, like nobody should be able to see my own account. So accessibility is again a responsibility, part of data governance. Security, you have to ensure that the data is secured. You have to ensure that the quality, data quality, is maintained, and obviously you are generating knowledge out of this data. So unless all these things are met, you cannot get knowledge out of the data. If you are not able to trust data, you cannot you cannot derive anything, or you cannot interpret anything from the data. You don't believe the data. And then therefore you cannot make any rules or make any decision based on the data. So data governance is, in a nutshell, is collection of processes, rules, policies, standards, and metrics. So typically we do it without knowing it. Sometimes whatever we know, it's actually imbibed in all the way we are taught, or the way project management principles. So all those things would be actually some of the things that we actually know, and we actually do it also. But with big data, the data governance has actually came up a bit more, because the data is coming from various sources, and you have to control that data, and sometimes it's not possible to control the data. So all those things, so therefore data governance becomes a kind of a buzzword, where it has become a clearly a differentiator. It's one of the differentiator between successful projects and maybe project failures. So it's a collection of processes, rules, policies, and standards and metrics to ensure effective and efficient use of information, enabling an organization to achieve its goal. So data governance is obviously defining the roles and responsibilities, and what situations and what methods that you are going to use. So it's data quality, master data management. So all these are aspects of data governance. And it's not optional now. Okay, so you cannot assume anything here. It is not an optional for any live data science project. It is a must. So actually, I've been telling you why data governance. Obviously, you cannot scale, like, just imagine the activity 7 management, proper control, and proper and if you have to deliver value with data at scale, with data in motion, data governance is must. Okay, so we have been handling data from ages, like it's not nothing new. Like maybe you can say that, okay, I'm writing an update SQL query every day. Okay, I know how to update the data. I know how to manage a database in SQL or Oracle or whatever the database that you have. I know how to play with it. I know how to query it. I know how to process it. So you know everything. You are managing your own data all the time. You are organizing your mobile all the time. But here it's becoming although we know it, when you are actually working with big data in an organization on a live data project, these policies becomes a most important aspect of your project, of any data science projects. So good governance provides visibility and quality that boost confidence in AI and other advanced emotion. If without good governance, there will be not be any confidence in AI. You will not be able to ensure that your model is correct. Okay, you are not able. You yourself is not getting an confidence in the AI model that what you have. So, as far as data governance framework is considered, there are focus on 5 key areas. Like there's obviously program management, the basic management you have to do. Then there's a metadata management. I will talk about the metadata management later. Data architecture, how the data is flowing. The first diagram that I have shown, various data is flowing from various sources coming into your data lake, and then there are processing happening, and then we are going to see data security and privacy. So many uh, data security and privacy. Obviously, we know so many data security issues and cyber security laws and all those things. So all those things becomes applicable here, and depending on the criticality of your project, you should be knowing those in depth. And the data quality. If the data is not of good quality, nothing can be done out of that data. Okay, it's like a garbage. So there are 3 principles of data governance: transparency, accountability, and standardization. So there has to be transparency of how you are doing the processing the data, what are the filters that you are going to apply. So it has to be transparent to the end user. I'm talking about transparency to the end user. It's not the project and the end user. So transparency to business. Okay, for example, like if you are giving just a sales figures, and if you forgot to give sales figures for one region, and you're supposed to give the total figures to the business, then obviously you are giving the wrong data. So here you have to apply a complete transparency to the end users. You are accountable for the data. So if something is going wrong, you are accountable for the data. So there are all those things, and you have to standardize the way the data is governed. So transparency builds trust. Trust becomes loyalty. It's a winning strategy to most of the organization. The assurance that data being reported is accurate and coming from the official source. So that's what transparency means. Accountability means responsibility of anyone who has a role to play regarding data in the organization. So nobody is unauthentically altering the data. Nobody is tampering with the data in your account, like in your bank account. So nobody is taking money out or putting money in unauthorized in your account. So people are held accountable for taking data related actions in the specific times. Standardization improves the quality of the data. It helps organization to communicate better. So there's a basic understanding and how the standardization would work. So these are the focus areas of data governance. The first is obviously the policy. how you are going to govern. So your project management plan, or there should be a data quality plan to be defined and to be implemented, communicated properly for the entire project. So there has to be a policy. So whatever aspects I'm going to cover in my data governance 4 sessions, all these aspects of data governance has to be properly documented for the project and properly communicated to the team and as well as implemented. So there has to be a data governance policy for a data science project, which will define how, who is going to have access, what are the quality, how we are going to manage the quality, how we are going to ensure that the data is compliant to various legal formalities, okay, or industry regulations, and so it, and also laws like local, state, federal, and international laws. So I think today should we discuss more about, like, if maybe next 10 minutes we can focus on we taking some questions so that I can take it up in the next session, because this is a logical point where I want to stop. So if there are any questions, then I can take it up.